Welcome to the Geekcentric podcast, and welcome to our spoiler-free review for Star Wars, The Mandalorian and Grogu. I'll take out every bad guy in your deck of cards. Welcome to the Geekcentric podcast. This is the way. My name is Nate, and this is our spoiler-free review for Star Wars, The Mandalorian and Grogu. A hut-sized thanks to our friends at Disney Studios Canada and Lucasfilm for inviting us to check out this movie early for review. If you're joining us for the first time, we are Geekcentric, a podcast celebrating the world of movies, TV shows, video games, and all things geek-centric and all things Star Wars. We love Star Wars on the Geekcentric podcast. We talk about Star Wars in more reviews than we should. A lot of reviews that aren't even a Star Wars thing that we're reviewing. We're talking about Star Wars. I believe this is officially, since we've started being invited to these things, this is officially the first Star Wars film we've ever reviewed on the podcast. So to join me for this momentous occasion, he's not small and green, but he has certainly enjoyed his fair share of small and green. He's the daring, dubious dude from Dagobah. He's the Dejaric dominating Darcy, the hut-hunting Hudson. How you doing, Darcy?
Good. I like that. Like the Star Wars filled names always make me smile because it's just so many Easter eggs for me to just be like, yeah, I like all that stuff.
The dubious dude from Dagobah. I think we've been calling you that for quite some time.
Yeah, yep. And it just it works. I don't know. Dagobah was the name of my Animal Crossing town too, so I took it to. It's a real thing now.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Not before, but once it's in Animal Crossing, of course.
Yeah, that's kind of cemented in stone. Like I spent hours in that town, man.
Darcy, I was saying, just now, we are massive Star Wars fans. I think anybody who's listened to the Geekcentric podcast has followed us, has seen what we've been doing over the years. We started, honestly, the earliest days of the Geekcentric podcast, we're talking about The Mandalorian. And so, it's pretty incredible that we are here at this point. It's been 7 years since the last Star Wars film. It's been 7 years, almost 7 years, about 6.5 years or so since, Darcy, we went to the 9-film marathon for Rise of Skywalker. And here we are with the very characters that kicked off Star Wars on streaming. They're now ushering us back into the theaters. How are you feeling, Darcy, now that we're on the other side?
Honestly, I don't know if this was the movie I would have gone with to be the return to theaters. With especially Starfighter with Ryan Gosling and Sean Levy, just that magic pairing that has so much hype building up around that alone. I feel like that could have been a bigger event than what just felt like a continuation of a TV show.
Yeah, and we will get into it. I kind of wanted to kick things off by talking about just how much we do love Star Wars, because I think this review, based off of our conversations out of the theater, it's going to go a certain way. And I want to make sure that, again, all of what we're saying, it's going to be spoiler-free, obviously. We're a little late to this review. We're not hitting it just at the time the embargo lifted. But I think it's one of those things where we want to make sure you're aware we are maybe a little bit harsher on this movie because we are so passionate. We love this stuff so much, and we want it to succeed, and we want it to really kind of be always improving and always just kind of moving a little bit forward. So let's get into this, Darcy, because there's a lot to talk about. And I'm excited. I'm still excited. A Star Wars movie is in theaters, and that's still something to celebrate. So let's get to the synopsis here. The evil empire has fallen, and Imperial warlords remain scattered throughout the galaxy. As the fledgling New Republic works to protect everything the rebellion fought for, they have enlisted the help of legendary Mandalorian bounty hunter Din Djarin and his young apprentice Grogu. Directed by Jon Favreau, Star Wars The Mandalorian and Grogu stars Pedro Pascal as the Mandalorian, Sigourney Weaver as Colonel Ward, Steve Bloom as Zeb Aurelios, and Jeremy Allen White as Rota the Hutt. The film is produced by Kathleen Kennedy, Ian Bryce, Jon Favreau, and Dave Filoni, with music composed by Ludwig Göransson. Star Wars The Mandalorian and Grogu opens in theaters May 22nd, 2026. So Darcy, let's dig into this Star Wars movie, which, as I said, The Mandalorian brought us into the Disney Plus streaming era. And back then, I think we learned what the volume was, right? And it was this incredible thing that they were using for that show and that series. And they did some really cool stuff that sort of felt like they were able to take things beyond the streaming budget to where Star Wars should be at all times. And I think it might have gotten a little bit overused at a certain point within those 3 seasons, where we were like, kind of longing for more real, bigger sets. But I still remember there were moments in that show, or we're talking about that show that we talked about, where we were like, it looks like a Star Wars movie at times. And so I think the Mandalorian and Grogu, it's funny, we're now back in the theaters. Let's talk about the good, maybe a little bit bad, about the look and feel of this movie, because I do think there are a lot of moments that do finally feel like we're seeing an actual Star Wars Mandalorian movie. And then there are other elements that did kind of take me back a little bit and feel like we were looking at a streaming series again. But Darcy, what did you think about the look and feel of Star Wars, The Mandalorian and Grogu?
Yeah, again, I think this is one of the things that is very consistent with the show, in that it nails the vibe it was going for. I mean, it looks like Star Wars, and like you said, it does go bigger at times. It feels like it does deserve to be on the IMAX screen we saw it on, with some of the scale and scope of the shots we were getting. But again, other times it did just feel like more of the same, which was a really great produced TV show. But I'm not sure if that, again, was justified to bring to the big screen in the way that they did.
Yeah. I think justified is a word that's going to come up a few times in our conversation here. I think sticking with the positives, I definitely have a bunch with look and feel, just because of the artistry in this movie. And you mentioned the IMAX screen. I did think that there were so many sequences that looked incredible in IMAX. I think for fans of IMAX specifically, I think film cinematography fans, there might be some arguments to be made about some of those moments in IMAX for this movie. But as a Star Wars fan, Darcy, you and I,
it was cool.
We were giggling. Cool. I was giggling. I was giddy. You see the scale of AT-ATs in IMAX, right? I think that might have been the biggest that I remember ever seeing them showcased on a screen. Seeing X-Wings fly with the sun behind them, with the Apocalypse Now style, sort of shot in IMAX, had me freaking out. Seeing now Hutta, the Hutt homeworld, looked incredible in IMAX. And I think it actually falls it hits so hard, where this movie, I think, actually that's maybe the first missed opportunity that I will bring up, is that I think the IMAX sequences, if it had just stayed in IMAX, I think that could have helped to justify a theatrical run of this story. And I just wish we'd never switch aspect ratios. There's a moment where we get this beautiful sort of sequence where a ship is taking off, and we get to sort of see in real time the screen transition from wide to full IMAX. And the movie stays like that for like 8 minutes, to the point where it had my hopes up a little bit, because we had seen a few IMAX sequences before that. And I'm like, okay, this is it. Now we're just going to stay in IMAX because we're going on this adventure. And it just didn't do that. It kept switching back at times, and it felt like a ride at times. It felt kind of like Star Tours at times, but I don't want my Star Tours interrupted over and over and over again and constantly taking me out. And I just felt like I was forced to get off the ride throughout this movie. And I really think if it had just stuck with that beautiful big IMAX aspect ratio, that for me would have been enough for me to really say, absolutely go see this in theaters.
Hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with you there. And again, another one of the things too with the look and feel is that the fact that the first two seasons specifically did such a good job of bringing that movie level storytelling and scope and scale to a TV show. When they do it in this movie, it's not like they're doing anything different. They're still approaching it the same way they made the TV show, which just again didn't make that leap to the screen like I was hoping for.
And I think that's a big thing. We talk about, intention with movies and with TV series. What is their intention? And I think we talk about, whether or not they're nailing what they're trying to do. And sometimes they go a little bit too far. I think we brought up in our conversation Skeleton Crew and how it felt like a phenomenal Amblin story. But you get to the end of the Skeleton Crew, the way it ends, and unfortunately, it feels like the ending of an Amblin movie, which, again, great. That's what they're going for. But they might have pushed a little bit too far and a little too hard on trying to be that to a fault. And I think that's something that this movie does as well. In terms of trying to be like the show, and we'll talk about that. I do want to bring up the action sequences, though. Seeing Mando go full Mando in that opening sequence, we got to see
Hmm.
that opening sequence back in Japan at Star Wars Celebration, and some really wicked John Wick style combat. Really, really cool. Maybe some of his best. I think this is some of the most badassery that we've seen Din Djarin perform on a
Hmm.
screen. And we do get that maybe a little bit, throughout the movie, maybe two more times since after the opening sequence. But I will say also seeing how other species in Star Wars fight, in my opinion, might have been even cooler because they were adding something new to this mythos. And specifically, seeing how a hut could move around quickly was something that I never thought I'd ever see. We think back to the original trilogy and like how many people it took to operate Jabba the Hutt, and he's just a big giant, stationary creature. And so to get to see a hut moving around fast was so cool and so rad.
Yeah, yeah. The combat was really cool too, and it's one thing that they carried on from the show really well was the way that the Mando fights. It's again he fights very sloppily almost. Like he takes a lot of hits and stuff like that, but he keeps on going, and that's kind of what that makes him the Mando. Is that his inventiveness to find new ways out of a situation when he's like put against the ropes type thing. So it was really cool moments throughout that. Again, that felt very Mandalorian. It was really cool to see. Just it didn't go any further than that. It wasn't like he was doing anything new, unfortunately. It was just some of the best stuff we've seen, yes, but it wasn't anything groundbreaking in terms of the character, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, again, and we might say this a few times, but 3 seasons with this character, right? And
Hmm.
there wasn't really a new weapon, there wasn't really a new sort of technique or new, it was great Mandalorian, but not something that felt elevated like you would expect in a movie.
Hmm.
I would do want to say huge shout out to Grogu. I want to shout out Grogu and specifically the puppetry in this film. There's
Hmm.
very little CG used for Grogu. I think it pays off huge. I love seeing his little floppy ears shaking around. He's incredibly cute. If you think that Grogu's adorable, yes, you're in for a treat. He absolutely is adorable in this movie. I think in this day and age where they could have just made him full CG, they stuck to their guns. They delivered puppetry that's not only a wonderful homage to the original Master Yoda, but also it never took me out of the film seeing
No.
him. And I think the various creatures in this movie, the use of stop motion in this movie,
Hmm.
I think just does such a good job pulling from the Phil Tippett side of Star Wars. And I think that's something that original trilogy fans can appreciate quite a bit because I feel like in the new era of Star Wars, in the sequel trilogy, we did kind of move away from like the cool creatures. We got a little bit of that in The
Hmm.
Force Awakens, but it felt like we kind of moved away from it. And so to see that in full force in this movie was great. And there's going to be so many creatures and different characters and weird characters and freaks in this movie that I think original Star Wars trilogy fans are really going to love.
Yeah, and again, I think the fact that they're using so much practical stuff to tell these stories really lends itself to the characters. I mean, we talk all these actors who interact with Grogu over the years talk about they instantly fall in love and find themselves talking to a puppet on set because it's just so lifelike and engaging that, like, again, it's going to make you care for it instantly, and you see that in some of these performances, which is really cool. And again, extending that to all the characters and other creatures we see was just. Again, that really makes it feel like Star Wars. So it is cool that they are continuing on that legacy, even when it's a lot of companies would just be like, oh, we can CG it in, that's fine, we'll fix it in post forever. Like, no, we'll do it so in the room so it feels more tangible and feels real. So it helps.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, Zeb and Rata were huge things for us as fans of the animated side of Star Wars coming into this that we were excited to see. And I think it was really impressive to see them brought into live action, and specifically with the scenes in them where, you know, I think they were maybe a little more still. I think was probably at the best of how they looked visually
Mm-hmm.
on the screen. I did feel like, as much as I enjoyed seeing a hut, you know, jumping around and moving around and flipping around and, you know, squirming around or whatever, and Zeb, you know, has an amazing action sequence through a hallway that you've probably seen in the trailer. I did feel like there were a lot of moments, though, where it did look a little rubbery. It did look a little bit more like a streaming budget,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just not something that I would expect out of a Star Wars movie, specifically. But you know, at least these days, you know, in
Yeah.
2026, you would hope
Yeah.
that they could have maybe gotten that a little bit tighter. Ludwig Göransson, Darcy,
Yeah.
come on,
It's, I mean,
come on.
this is where it again, it works. He did such a good job defining the sound of the Mandalorian story that he did the same thing here and brought it in the new ways he works the motif in different genres for the different locales we go to. It's masterwork. But again, it with after 3 seasons of the show and seeing him do that for every season, it just kind of feels like he's doing it again with this one. So it's, again, not taking it to that movie score level that I was kind of hoping. Unfortunately, there were some moments there that theme pops off in the different genres and stuff like that, but it was never that fist pumping moment I kind of really wanted to get from a
Mm.
Star Wars movie. You know?
Yeah, I think I think there was a lot of stuff with this film that felt like they were like a little more surface level than they should have been. Like there could have been a little more. They could have just pushed it a little bit further. I do think in the opening sequence we do get that Mandalorian theme with some extra strings, with some extra drums in there that do kind of got me a little bit like, oh, okay, I was bouncing, I was ready to go, you know, and I could feel it. And I think listening to the soundtrack afterwards, you know, I think the entire ride home, you and I were just, you know, just humming along the thing,
Yep.
you know, we were just singing it. You know, I think the 80s synth sort of trap version of the theme is a vibe. If you get a chance to check this one out, it is on Apple Music, Spotify. You can definitely check it out. Whenever they got to, I kept calling it Chicago, but which it's kind of like the Star Wars version of Chicago, but they get to a moon of Shikari is the name of
Mhm.
this planet, and that trap version really hits. And then you know, there is no after credit scene in this movie. However, is it worth sticking around to the credits?
Yes.
Absolutely, because
Yes.
there's a dope 1960s like avant-garde folk version that Darcy you said sounded like What We Do in the Shadows
Yes, it
version.
reminded me of that, but it's very clearly like meant to be a spaghetti western like credit song. Basically, it was a nice surprise, despite it not being anything visual. It was a very an auditory delight.
Absolutely. I thought it could have been in the movie. I think there were a few spots they could have maybe fit that in. Let's talk about the performances for this film. You know, it's funny because you think of a Star Wars movie, you think I would be listing off a ton of names, and here that isn't really the case. We've got kind of a smaller cast for this movie, but I think we have to start with the Mandalorian himself, Pedro Pascal, Din Djarin. I think this might have been like where I had the least notes in my little notebook where I you know, and that's not to say that his performance is bad by any stretch of the imagination. You know, if you love him in The Mandalorian, you're gonna love him in this too. Like, there's nothing that he did that felt offensive or felt lesser than. There's a very short period of time where he has his helmet off, and that's about the most that I think we can really see in his face, his performance. I think vocally, he still did a great job. He's the Mandalorian. He is the
Yeah.
Mandalorian. He'll always be the Mandalorian. If you enjoy him in the show, you'll enjoy him in this. Darcy, what did you think of Pedro Pascal in this movie?
Well, like you said, he is the Mandalorian. You hear that voice, you know exactly who's underneath the helmet. You don't really need to see it. It does feel kind of odd for a movie to not showcase Pedro Pascal's face. Like it's weird. Again, I get it for the show, it's the whole thing, but we feel like we moved past that. We would have gotten to see a bit more of him being Pedro type thing. Seeing Din's face would have gone a long way, I think. But what was cool though is I noticed in the credits, the first three people were Pedro Pascal and the two stunt doubles who also helped bring the Mandalorian to life, which is really neat because there's so much more to Din Djarin than just Pedro's performance. Like the
Yeah,
Mandalorian is just as much Pedro Pascal as it is Brendan Wayne and Lateef. I'm
Crowder.
sorry, I'm forgetting Crowder. Yeah,
Yeah,
like they bring the physicality and the small mannerisms. And when you talk, like listen to them talk about bringing the character to life, they talk about how they'll notice one of them do a small thing and they try and emulate that in the next scene or whatever and be like, oh, he took that hit pretty hard on the right leg, so I'm going to kind of walk with a tender right leg. So it's cool to see how three people are working together to bring, again, what a performance that is. Again, covering up the face, it is very a physicality thing. It's how the body moves through the scene. So the fact that they were getting the again top billing, if you will, in the credits at the end there was pretty cool because it again, the performance is everything you want from the Mandalorian, but it, again, didn't go that movie level, unfortunately.
yeah, but I like that call out, Darcy. I do think that's really important, and I'm happy that they were credited as such because it
Hmm.
is three people, and honestly, there is more movement than there even is speaking
Yes.
at a lot of times with the Mandalorian. He's a man of few words, so that's fine. I think they did a great job, and I was the action in this movie. Again, as I said, he's kicking a lot of ass. Sigourney Weaver is in this movie, by the way. The legendary Sigourney Weaver, the sci-fi legend Sigourney Weaver. But I will say, Darcy, as we were leaving the theater, I don't think I could have told you her name was Colonel Ward.
Nope.
I don't. There really wasn't much to go off with Sigourney Weaver. She's in two scenes in this movie. Darcy, what did you think of Sigourney Weaver in this film?
This is where again some of the comments about it, season 4 being condensed into this film really stands out because I feel like had we gotten a season of this storyline, we would have spent a lot more time with her character and gotten to know her because like while she fits the universe perfectly, again, Sigourney Weaver is a sci-fi legend, and just seeing her in Star Wars and in that rebel pilot outfit works, and I think it worked really well for me. I just wish we got more because again, it's very forgetful that she was in the scene, and pretty much anyone else at the rebel base could have filled her role. It was interesting to again bring her in to just kind of sideline her like that.
You got to wonder if there was something more, if there was stuff on the cutting room floor, if stuff was
Hmm.
deleted. I think it is one of those interesting things where it's like, well, we're a movie. We've got Sigourney Weaver. You know what I mean?
Right?
And so
Yeah.
it's interesting. We're a movie. We have Jeremy Allen White in here as Rata the Hutt. I will say, I think Rata the Hutt might be a big highlight in terms of the characters and the performances in this movie. I don't fully, I didn't fully know what to think of his character at first, but they're doing some weird, interesting modulation with Jeremy Allen White's voice in
Hmm.
this, and you think of him kind of as like a, he's the guy, the chef in the bear. He's Carmy in the bear, like he's kind of this neurotic sort of uh, voice that we normally hear, and here he's a massive, muscly Hut. But I think over the course of this his story. I love how they did sort of draw some parallels to him and Grogu, and it even connects to a certain degree with him between him and Mando and Din Djarin. I think it's relevant to both their stories. I don't think they went as far as they could have with this theme. It does feel very surface level with him, but I do think he was one of the best things they could have added to this story for me. and I felt more for him by the end of this story than I anticipated that I would coming into this film. I think it was a blast to see him fighting. I think the physicality with this character is awesome. He's a cool character. I hope we do get more. I didn't think I'd ever say this after seeing him as a little baby getting stolen in the Clone Wars, but I do hope we do get to see more of him in Star Wars in the future.
Yeah, now my one big issue with the introduction of this character in live action is that they changed his name or pronunciation, because wasn't it Rota in Clone Wars, and now it's Rata? And like, I'm sorry, Star Wars is Han. I get that, but
Darcy, for the longest
come on,
time,
Dave, you came up with this storyline.
Darcy, for the longest time, I've been Nat, I've been Nathaniel, I've been Nate. You know, sometimes we change things.
I guess so. Yeah, whatever. Anyways, he did a great job. Again, I think it was an interesting choice to hear. Again, hearing a Hutt speak English fluently with, like, again, no accent took a while for me to get used to, but it was a neat idea for the modulation you're talking about, because when you hear them speaking Huttese, it's a lot almost like there's like a throat singing level, and then like the like actual syllables coming out over top of it. So it's like they were recreating that with an English twist on it. So it was cool to hear that. And again, I agree with you. I think his story was very interesting. It was cool to see, again, this Hutt being humanized when all we've known them as horrible gangster bosses. So seeing them in this new light is really cool. And it just felt very surface level, unfortunately. That's like you said, they didn't go past the brief connections you could see that are very, very overt, and then they don't touch back on it at all. So it's kind of weird. Again, it feels like had we had more time over a season with these characters, some of this stuff may have resonated a bit more or had a bit more payoff in the end, I guess. I don't know. It's just a lot of it feels great. I love what they're trying to do, but wish we had more time, which is kind of the unfortunate thing when you have a TV show going to a movie. You're used to having more time with these characters.
Yeah. Steve Blum is in this movie. Zeb Aurelios, as I said earlier, we were so stoked to see Zeb in live action. We were stoked to see him in The Mandalorian, the show, and then here again. I was happy he is along for the ride, but again, it didn't feel like he had a ton to do in this movie. He was just kind of there a lot of the times, and he's such a good character. If you know him from the animated series, if you know how Steve Blum performs him, I think this proves that you could do more with Zeb in live action. I do wonder, though, if maybe from a budget standpoint, that will continue to be a limiting factor for telling live action stories with him in the future. Who knows? Again, they've got a lot of money, so I know it feels weird to be like, oh, the budgets, but they do still have budgets for these things. And you know, if I do think of a future of live action Zeb, it would be in something like an Ahsoka season 2 or a streaming series. And so it's like, who knows how much we can really get of him in that way. Again, dope hallway combat moment, but he's not really. He could have not been in the movie as well.
Yeah, he was there. It felt like an episode of Rebels where he's just there to pick up Kanan Ezra at the end of the episode type thing. Like he appears just to serve a point and get us to the next scene. And it's like, again, with so many people introduced in The Mandalorian, did it have to be someone that is so beloved and just be sidelined? Steve Blum did a great job bringing him back to life again, or bringing to live action again. It felt he sounds just as he did in Rebels, so that was great. It's just wish we kind of had more substance to his storyline.
Yeah. Substance is something that will come up again. Substance will return when we talk about story. Martin Scorsese is in this movie. The director whose comments were memed around the internet for him not thinking of these kind of movies as cinema, for specifically the MCU, but I think he was talking about Star Wars as well. I think he was doing this out of his friendship with Jon Favreau.
100%.
Right? He's the same Ardenian species. He's an Ardenian, which is the same species that Jon Favreau was in Solo, a Star Wars story. So I love that little connection there. I think I actually really enjoyed his performance in this movie. I think his voice was great. I'm like, you know what? I would watch a little bit more of this fry cook, who I don't think even has a name in the credits, but Martin Scorsese, Shout out to you, brother.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of coming around to his random acting appearances and the later years, and he's having fun and he's helping out friends. So I guess it's cool. And again, it worked for this vibe. Again, someone you're getting information from on the street level of a Chicago like town. Scorsese just kind of fits the bill.
I wanted one of those sandwiches he was making. You know what I
It
mean? And
did look
again,
good.
another nod to Jon Favreau with his movie Chef, right? And the sandwiches that he makes, right, in his little food truck and whatever. And then one last shout out that I want to give. Again, this circles back to the puppetry, to the Grogu of it all. I want to shout out the Anzellans, brother, because I love Mia. Hey, I love the Anzellans so much. They are the Star Wars versions of minions in this movie, I think, but in a good way, not in a bad way, not in an annoying way. They're my favorite little freaks of the modern Star Wars era, and I'm just happy that they're all living with Mando and Grogu in their house. I was not expecting that they were going to be roommates, basically. And you know, I think the voice of Moaning Myrtle herself, Shirley Henderson, she does a great job yet again. With you know, she did a great job with Babu Frick. She's doing a great job with all these Anzellans. Yeah, I was really happy that they were in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, they weren't bad. They're also way more legible or clearly spoken than Babu Frick. So I think that
That's
also helped
true.
with some of their little jokes landing.
Yeah, you have to wonder maybe by the time we meet Babu, if like maybe their species is kind of lost a little bit. I like that. I like that. I like that. You're not wrong. We don't know how they aged. Maybe Babu is just a really old man that just knows how to say like, "Droid, go black black." Um, let's get to this story without talking about the story again. We are going to stay spoiler free. But before we get to what I collectively felt, you and I will probably talk about what didn't work. I want to know, Darcy, what are some aspects about this story that did work for you?
Again, uh, there's a lot to like here because it's the Mandalorian and Grogu, and we get some really cool action scenes, and the growth we do get from the characters. There's a beautiful moment or scene, extended scene, I guess, or segment in the middle that really shows some growth with these characters, which is really cool to see, and that's really going to stick with me. And I think that's probably the highlight for the movie for me. Uh, and around that is they were trying to tell a cool Star Wars story, but it just feels a bit rushed. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
not sure if like again the potential for a cool story is something I liked about it, I guess. But again, they didn't stick the landing, so that's probably about as positive as I can be,
That's
unfortunately.
okay. That's okay, Darcy. Let me jump in. Let me jump in here. Um, you know, I think there are a lot of really cool Easter eggs for that didn't feel too cheap. They are some deep cut stuff. It's not just like, you know, like look at this shiny thing over here. It does feel like you do have to look for them. You know, I think this is a movie that it's interesting. This might be the first Star Wars movie that I'm not like running back to the theaters to want to watch again, but I do want to watch it again just to see the various little things that maybe I've missed before New Rockstars comes out and reveals all of them. You know, I think the fans of the Mandalorian series specifically, there's some really cool, you know, Easter eggs and deep cut stuff in there. You're gonna get your Wilhelm scream, right? You're gonna get your OG Dejaric references. There's in some really cool ways, and the ways that they also expand on the Hutts and their home world. We get to see now Hutta. We get to see how they move around is a little weird, but also like really cool to see as a Star Wars fan. We get recycled droids, bro. They look so sick. And we get Anzellans and Embo is there with his dog. It's so cool. You brought up the portion of the movie that I think is going to work for a lot of people, and that is when we sort of get, you know, the movie's called The Mandalorian and Grogu. We get the Mandalorian, and then we also get Grogu himself, and I think this is where the story was an improvement on the show. This section here, because I think there's a lot of moments in the Mandalorian where you know, you sort of just have Grogu as a character on the side almost. He's a shoulder pet a lot of the times in the show. And we do get slight moments of development with him, and we do get slight moments where we get to sort of focus on him. But I think this movie, there is a specific section of the film that did it that actually was, for me, felt a little better than the show. But
Yeah.
again, it wasn't a ton. It was just a sequence, and it felt like we were watching more than just Mando's son. But we've had a lot of time with this character already. He does deserve more, even though he's just a cute little baby. He deserves more, and I think this movie did that a little bit. Now, as we start to move into maybe some of the more negatives, I think there's not as much as I'd hoped for in terms of the Mandalorian movie for connected character growth with Mando and Grogu. Right? We talked about how the connection between Rota and or Rata or however you want to pronounce his name. We talked about his. I talked about his connection with Mando and Grogu and how they sort of kept that a little bit surface level. They did the same thing with the growth between Mando and Grogu, and the movie doesn't really offer anything new. We've had 3
Hmm.
seasons with this character, and I think the other side to look at it from, if we're looking at it from the side of like, well, this is a movie and needs to be for people who haven't watched 3 seasons of the show, I still don't think there was enough there, even if I didn't already have 3 seasons of great
Hmm.
growth with these characters. When I think of a movie version of a show, that needs to be a big event moment for the characters in their arc. And this
Hmm.
just wasn't that. It felt like another adventure, but it wasn't the biggest adventure, mind blowing thing, or a big adventure that's going to be so memorable because it really pushed them forward. It just didn't have that. And so I think Mando gains a slight shift in perspective, but not as much as I'd want him to by the end of the film.
No, like again, we were on the way to the movie. We were saying like the one thing we really wanted from it was for Mando and Grogu to begin the movie at one place and end somewhere else. And unfortunately, it feels like they just end right back where the movie starts, where the
Yeah.
end of season 3, or even where the end of season 1 began, basically happened or left us. So it's crazy when you think like we had the Moff Gideon storyline being such a big thing in their lives, and he was such a big baddie who was overarching the 2 seasons or whatever, and then we get to a movie, we're going to have a nice big movie baddie, and unfortunately there's just not a satisfying through point for these people to be fighting. So it just feels like another episode of the week adventure type thing where the stakes aren't being raised to the level that you want for a movie, especially with Mando and Grogu. Again, they deserve a good story where they can really show their stuff and grow as characters. And unfortunately, we just didn't get that.
Yeah, you think of some of the TV, you think of some of the TV shows and how they've jumped to movies. You think of the Simpsons movie, right? Like there's a big thing between Homer and Marge's relationship in that movie, right? And it's
Hmm.
like that's just not here. You want it to feel bigger than it is, and it just doesn't. I think there's a few moments in this movie where characters around the Mandalorian call his actions as a bounty hunter messy, very messy. And it's funny because that's the pacing of this movie. This movie
Hmm.
is 2 hours and 12 minutes long. I think they could have shaved a significant amount of time off of it. I think we could have cut it down by even a half an hour, and I think that would
Hmm.
have made all the better. But we're kind of getting, you'll hear it. You've probably already heard it around the internet, but 3 or 4 episodes stitched together. There's very clear moments in this movie where you're like, that's where the episode ended, and that's where the episode begins. And that's not to say this isn't a full cohesive story, right? There's a lot of fun stuff in between, but then there's a lot of stuff in between that bogs everything down. And we could have watched this at home, and we were saying like, there could have been 2 out of these 4 episodes that you and I would have been like, yeah, but did you see when that was so sick when that happened? Or like, oh man, I really liked Road of the Hut in episode 3 or whatever, right? Or episode 4.
Hmm.
Like, I think there was such a clear push to take this story that could have fit so much better in the streaming series, and it's just a weird decision to structure the movie in this way. I don't know.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. uh I didn't feel a lot in terms of emotions. I didn't feel fear that much. I did feel some like, yeah, let's go kind of moments because I'm a Star Wars fan, right?
Yeah.
But I think
Yeah.
Star Wars is at its best when it does find some of that balance. You know what I mean? Between the substance, like we were saying, and those fun hell yeah Star Wars moments.
Mhm.
And I don't know if we really just got that much depth. Darcy, I know it sounds like we're being super negative on this movie, but and it's funny too because on the way home, just for some inside baseball for people listening, Darcy was like, "You keep trying to like talk yourself up on this
Yes, he
movie."
that was what he like, but at least they were trying to do this with it, and like they were going for this. I'm like, you want to find something you like about it, but the fact that you're saying they were trying or they were going for it and they didn't do, it's you can tell where you're actually feeling, man.
Because it's the first time that I've come out of a Star Wars movie, and you know what? I mean,
I get you, man. I
there are other Star Wars movies that definitely are not as good, and we all have our own individual rankings, right?
Oh yeah,
Within the what is it, 12 movies that have been released, or
yeah.
however many movies, and so it's like I just it feels weird. It's a weird feeling to come out of a Star Wars movie and not feel like I want to run right back in the theater and watch it again. Darcy, let's get to our final thoughts and score on a scale of 1 to 5 bounties.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like I really hate it and didn't have anything to like about it. But again, I like Star Wars, and there's enough in this to enjoy. If you like Mandalorian and Grogu, there's going to be some fun moments. There's some cool Star Wars at its best, or Star Wars just being Star Wars, fantasy in space, cool little moments. It's just unfortunately it's packaged in a very lackluster story that feels hollow because there wasn't enough time to fully explore what they had planned to tell. So unfortunately, while it is really cool to see Star Wars back in theaters again, I don't think this was the one that was necessary for them to come back to theaters with. So go and see it if you're a fan of Star Wars, because again, you will find things to like. There will be something in there will get your nerd juices flowing a bit, and that's a successful Star Wars to me, just to some extent. But this is, I think, my lowest Star Wars score, but I'm giving this one a 3 out of 5. What would we say? Uh,
Bounties.
yeah, this is a 3 out of 5 bounties for me, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so weird. I think this oddly reminded me of Moana 2, right? Where you
Mm-hmm.
can
Mm-hmm.
clearly see how they attempted to take a story and structure directly from a series and apply it to a film, and it just doesn't work for me narratively. Um, like you said, Darcy, we're massive fans of these characters. We're massive fans of this world and Star Wars in general. And you know, I definitely can say, like you were saying, when this movie Star Wars is, it's Star Wars is. When it Mandalorians, it Mandalorians, and when it Grogu's, it Grogu's. And to see those moments as a Star Wars fan on an IMAX screen is still a treat that I'm very grateful for, and that I'm very happy we got from this film. But even with all that and the cute moments and the cool action set pieces, I didn't get the two things that I had hoped that this movie would give me. And as a Star Wars fan, that's a loaded thing a lot of the times where,
Mm-hmm.
you know, people from the outside looking in, they look at us Star Wars fans and they go, your expectations are too high. You need, you know, Darth Vader needs to show up in everything or you're not going to be happy. Like little things like that, right? But these were expectations that I don't think were too lofty. They weren't anything I was ever necessarily promised, but I think they should have happened. Number one, a reason to see this story specifically in theaters. As we said,
Mm-hmm.
we didn't get it.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, some deeper growth for Din Djarin and Grogu, showcasing an important moment for them that feels bigger than anything we got in the show. And we don't get that in any satisfying way that feels anywhere as close as rewarding to what we've already had. It was disappointing. And I do feel like this movie kind of feels, Darcy, like Disney and Lucasfilm sacrificed it as a way to say this was the first Star Wars film in 7 years. So when Starfighter comes out next year, it doesn't have to bear that weight in
Mm.
theaters as the first Star Wars film back in 7 years. My hopes are very high for that movie. My hopes are higher than they were going into this movie for a new Star Wars
Mm-hmm.
story and Star Wars adventure with new characters. I really can't wait to see what they do with that story and Ryan Gosling. But yeah, I am bummed to say I'm not super high on this one. I'm not super low either, though. Again, if you're a Star Wars fan, like Darcy was saying, you've already got your tickets. You probably have already seen it, maybe by now, if you've been to like a fan screening or what have you. I'm giving Star Wars, The Mandalorian and Grogu 3 out of 5 bounties. that is it for our spoiler free. It hurts. It hurts me, Darcy. It hurts me. It hurts my Star Wars
Trust me, it
soul.
hurts too. It hurts me too. I have so much money I've spent on Star Wars tattoos that I walk around with, and I really want to like the Star Wars stuff, but it hurts to me to say that this one wasn't doing it for me.
It didn't do it. It didn't do it. I do hope we get more stories with the Mandalorian and with Grogu. I really do think we will, despite however this movie does at the box office. I do think we are going to get more stories. Even though I did hear, and I didn't look this up before recording this, I did hear that Heir to the Empire project was canceled or shelved from Dave Filoni. Now, that's not to say that Dave Filoni's not going to still get his own movie. I still think he's running things over there. He's going to get his own movie. It just seems like maybe they're going to take things in a slightly different direction. I don't know what that means for Ahsoka Season 2. I don't know what it means for these characters. I do think, though, that Grogu is so popular. Mando is so popular. I don't see these characters going anywhere.
Well, especially the fact that in a world where force-sensitive individuals are so few and far between after the Empire had its way, a long-lived force-sensitive individual like Grogu is going to be popping up in future Star Wars for sure.
Yeah, he he's old already, and he's only going to get older, and I can't wait to see him grow. That is it for our spoiler-free review for Star Wars, The Mandalorian and Grogu. We hope you enjoyed it, and if you want to share your thoughts on this movie or any of the movies or series we cover, well, let me just have Darcy bring him in warm or bring him in cold. Either way, he's going to sing like a yuzzum to let you know how you can reach us.
What am I bringing in to make them sing? That's just so confusing. I'm killing someone to tell them how to do it. They can reach us at wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. That's wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. Or they can reach us on Twitter at geekcentricyt or on Instagram at wearegeekcentric.
No singing like a yuzzum. That's okay. That's okay. Keep in mind, we also have a ton of other great episodes covering the latest in movies and TV shows, including some spoiler-filled discussions for Marvel Television's Daredevil Born Again Season 2. If you want to hear us talk very positively about Star Wars, check out our spoiler-free and filled discussions for Star Wars Maul Shadow Lord. Holy moly, that show is so good. And we also have our spoiler-filled and free review for Invincible Season 4. We've also got spoiler-free reviews that you can check out for the Super Mario Galaxy movie, Project Hail Mary, and Prime Video's Young Sherlock. Plus, we've got some great interviews to check out, like one of our more recent Star Wars interviews with the cast and crew behind Maul Shadowlord, as well as some upcoming coverage for Spider Noir and Toy Story 5, which is... I feel so old when I say the words Toy Story 5, Darcy, the Toy Story saga. So be sure to check out those interviews as well as all of our interviews either here on your podcast service of choice or over on YouTube at youtube.com/geekcentric. That is it for now. We are looking forward to so much more this year. Toy Story 5, a new Spider-Man movie, Dune, Avengers, The Odyssey. We've got so much to be geeky about. And we hope you'll join us and be geeky about all the things that we love and you love. Stay tuned because we are Geekcentric and you can be too. Darcy, thank you so much for joining me for this Dewanawanga spoiler-free review. And as we say, love ya.
Laters.
This is the way,
I guess.